My name is Caitlin Moore, 33 years old, and that night at a family engagement party at the country club, my whole world collapsed. In the middle of the brightly lit room, my mother-in-law raised her glass, smiling coldly. From now on, only blood family will decide the finances. Caitlin will sign away all her rights or else. Don't come to Thanksgiving. The whole table burst into laughter. My husband bowed his head in silence, and I sat there feeling like an outsider in my own life. But they had no idea. The old quilt from my grandmother still held a secret that could shatter everything they were proud of. If it were you, what would you do when your in-laws all turned their backs and your own partner stood silently by? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to stay with me. Because right after this, I'll tell you the full truth behind that fake smile. I lay in a motel room on the outskirts of town, neon lights flickering through the dusty window, memories of the life I had lived flooding back like fragments of a slow-motion film. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, in a working-class family that never had much. My father worked at the local machine shop, his hands always covered in grease, while my mother worked night shifts as a nurse at the small city hospital. Even in high school, I was used to helping support the family. I worked part-time at a coffee shop near school, then bussed tables at an Italian restaurant on weekends. Every dollar I earned was carefully folded and tucked into the blue tin box I called my dream fund. That dream was simple. One day I would open my own physical therapy clinic, a place where I could help tired laborers, teachers with aching backs after long days of teaching, or young mothers recovering after childbirth. I met Tyler in my final year of college. He walked into my extra economics class, tall with an easy smile and eyes that could make any girl feel special. Tyler came from a family far more privileged than mine. They had a big house in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina, with a dining room large enough to host the kind of lavish parties I had only seen in movies. From the beginning, I felt the distance between me and his family, but Tyler was different. He was caring, gentle, and told me he loved my strength, loved my dream of opening a clinic. I believed him. I believed love was enough to bridge every gap. After graduation, Tyler wanted to pursue an MBA at Chapel Hill. The tuition was sky high, and his family insisted that if he was truly a man, he needed to prove himself. They told me directly over dinner, "Women should know their place," his mother Ruth said firmly. "If you truly love Tyler, you'll support him. But if you only think about yourself, maybe you should reconsider." I remember the look in Martin's eyes, his father, as he sat silently beside her. He lowered his gaze and kept cutting his steak. His silence felt colder than Ruth's words. I didn't argue. I knew Tyler wanted to study and I loved him. So I took on extra shifts. During the day I worked at an orthopedic clinic, and at night I went to the hospital as a support nurse for patients recovering from surgery. I was exhausted, but each time I saw Tyler studying hard in our small apartment, I told myself, just a few more years. Everything will be fine. We'll build our future together. On the nights I came home late, Tyler was usually asleep. I quietly pulled a blanket over him, then looked at the MBA books scattered across the table. Every time I saw them, hope rose in me again. I believed all my sacrifices would one day be rewarded, with a happy home and with the chance to open my own clinic supported by my husband. But reality doesn't always match what we believe. After Tyler graduated, he quickly landed a job at his family's company in Raleigh. They managed several commercial properties and Tyler was seen as the heir apparent. Meanwhile, I kept working, though small cracks began to appear inside me. My dream of opening a clinic was pushed off indefinitely. Each time I brought it up, Tyler would say, "Don't worry, Caitlin. Once things settle down, I'll help you. But right now, we need to focus on my career." I nodded, smiled, and kept giving everything for our family. When Martin had to undergo back surgery, I shouldered nearly all the responsibility for his care. I handled the insurance paperwork, arranged his recovery plan, even cleaned and reorganized his house so he could move around with his walker. Ruth was busy with her church women's group and Tyler was buried in work. Every day I stopped by, massaged Martin's back, managed his medication, and called the doctor whenever needed. One evening, as I was changing Martin's bandages, Ruth walked in and dropped her purse on the table. She looked at me and said flatly, "You're actually useful at this. At least your presence isn't completely wasted." I looked up, waiting for a word of thanks, but none came. Martin turned his face away without a word. I remember sitting there, my fingers trembling as I held the gauze, my chest filled with both hurt and shame. I told myself, this is my family. I have to be patient. One day they'll see my heart. But that day never came. In the weeks that followed, as Martin slowly recovered, I still visited daily. I brought hot soup, checked his medication, noted every flare of pain. But each time I walked in, the atmosphere in the house grew heavy. Grant, my brother-in-law, often sneered behind my back. Our sister-in-law really is a medical angel. Wonder how much she's getting paid to do all this. Neither Ruth nor Martin ever stopped him. I bit my tongue, pretended not to hear, but each word cut like a knife. When Martin could finally walk on his own, I thought he might at least thank me. Instead, at dinner, Ruth said, "See? In the end, this family can still rely on itself. Help from outsiders is only temporary." Outsider. That was what she called me, even after years of sacrifice, even after I had treated them like my own blood. I gripped my spoon tightly, swallowing every bitter word. Time went by, and my dream of a clinic drifted farther away. I had poured all my savings into Tyler's tuition, into Martin's medical bills, into expenses the Brooks family could easily have covered themselves. I began to feel like I wasn't a wife but some kind of utility. Tyler wasn't a bad man. He still cared sometimes, still held me when I was tired. But his silence in the face of his mother and brother's cruelty hurt me more than anything spoken aloud. Because silence often means consent. I remember one winter evening vividly. I had come home from a 12-hour hospital shift, my body freezing. When I stepped inside, Ruth was sitting in the living room with Tyler. As I hung up my coat, she glanced at me and said to her son, "Tyler, look at your wife. She's so busy she doesn't even have time for family. A good woman puts family first. Working so much is pointless." Tyler only lowered his head, saying nothing. I stood there, my hands trembling, then quietly went upstairs. That night I lay facing the wall, tears soaking my pillow. All I had given was never seen. My sacrifices only became another excuse for them to despise me. I used to think if I stayed patient, tried harder, they would change. But the truth became clearer with each passing day. In the Brooks family's eyes, I wasn't a wife, I wasn't a daughter. I was an outsider, existing only to serve their needs. And that realization, little by little, pushed me to my breaking point. The lights from that party still burned in my memory, like an unhealed wound. Every laugh, every mocking glance seemed to follow me as I walked out of the country club. I drove through the night, hands gripping the wheel, chest heavy, mind spinning. The headlights cut through the darkness, but inside, I felt swallowed by an endless void. The suburban motel appeared like a makeshift refuge. I dragged my suitcase from the trunk and stepped into the cramped room with its stained walls and bleach-scented sheets. As the door closed behind me, the world fell into silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, my arms limp, letting the tears pour out. Years of endurance, of sacrifice, had been ripped apart by a cheap staged video and a stack of humiliating papers. I kept hearing those words in my head, each one like a blade sinking deeper. "Sign it. From today we're clean." As if I were a stain to be scrubbed from their family. In that moment, my heart ached with both pain and humiliation. I remembered the look in Grant's eyes as he sneered, the whispers of his friends, and the cowardly silence of the man who had once sworn to protect me. I had hoped for a reassuring touch, a minimal word of defense, but all I got in return was a lowered, avoiding silhouette. I buried my head in my trembling hands. Memories poured in. The nights I worked double shifts to pay his tuition, the times I knelt to scrub my father-in-law's floors after surgery, the sweat I shed without ever expecting a single word of praise. I had thought that if I gave enough, they would see me as part of the family. But the truth was, I was only the one standing outside the door, called in when needed, thrown out when no longer useful. The ticking clock echoed in the empty room. I sat up straight and wiped my tears with the back of my hand. My mind grew clearer, the pieces reconnecting one by one. Tonight's public humiliation was not a sudden blow. It was the result of a long process, of contemptuous looks, veiled remarks, and complicit silences. I opened the packet of papers Ruth had placed in front of me. I had taken it with me not because I intended to sign, but because I wanted to see with my own eyes what they were plotting. The cold printed lines stretched on. Relinquish all property rights, relinquish all inheritance rights, relinquish even the right to make decisions in emergencies. All of it was designed to erase my legal presence from Tyler's life. I sighed and closed the packet. If I accepted, they would succeed. I would become a shadow exactly as they wanted. But if I refused, if I stood up, the story would not end the way they planned. Outside, wind hissed through the window frame, and the smell of damp earth seeped into the room. I stepped to the mirror and looked at my haggard face. Red eyes, tired skin, but in the reflected gaze I recognized one thing. There was still a power smoldering, something they could not take away. I will not let them use a fabricated story to define my life anymore. The phone vibrated on the nightstand. Tyler's name lit up the screen. My hand moved to answer, then I set it down. I didn't want to hear excuses or promises anymore. Not when my heart was still bleeding. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank. The familiar numbers appeared, but my eyes stopped on strange entries. Small, regular transfers to an account I had never heard of. Each detail surfaced, chillingly clear. I suddenly understood. Some things had not been transparent for a long time. Why did they choose tonight to humiliate me? Why was there such a carefully edited video? Could it be that they had prepared in advance, waiting for me to slip so they could strike the decisive blow? I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The hurt was no longer simple humiliation. It had turned into a quiet resolve, like a flame burning under ash. They thought I would sign, collapse, and disappear into silence. But they were wrong. I knew from this moment on, I would no longer be the woman who bowed her head and accepted. I would find the truth, and I would let the truth itself answer all the mocking laughter from tonight. In the cold motel room, I sat alone in front of the old laptop. The air conditioner rattled and the desk lamp flickered, casting a jittery glow over the jumble of numbers on the screen. At first, I only meant to check the joint account to make sure I had enough to cover a few days. But the deeper I went, the more I felt something was off. The words "More Family Foundation" appeared over and over in the transaction history. My chest tightened. Moore is my last name, not my in-laws. Yet the transfers were all connected to Ruth. I had never heard of this fund, much less signed any papers related to it. But there in front of me were dozens of withdrawals and transfers. None of them small. I opened the records further, trying to understand. There was a sub-account in both my name and mine alone, opened with my social security number. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who had done this? Who could use my name to create an account I knew nothing about? Could this be why they staged that humiliation at the country club? They needed me to disappear from the legal picture so that if anything happened, everything would fall squarely on me. I bit my lip and dug through the folder of documents I had brought. Amid old statements, my eyes stopped on a strange sheet of paper. The heading was clear: Transfer on Death Deed. I read it over and over, my heart pounding. It stated that in the event of my death, the house we lived in would automatically become Tyler's sole property. No court, no probate. I looked down at the signature line. Below it, a scrawled, misshapen signature bearing my name sat next to a notary seal. The notary was Caleb Whitaker, Ruth's cousin, a pastor who also served as a notary in the area. My hands shook as I held the paper close. I know my own handwriting. I know every stroke of my pen. But the ink on this page was completely foreign. It wasn't mine. A cold rush ran down my spine. I jumped to my feet, heart racing. They didn't want to push me out of the family. They had calculated far enough to forge my signature so that if something ever happened to me, every asset would slide into their hands, legally, neatly, without a crack showing. In my head, Ruth's mocking voice rang out, "Sign it. From today we're clean." Was she trying to get me to sign a postnup? She wanted me to believe that whether I signed or not, I would eventually vanish from their picture. My grip tightened as I called Sloan, my best friend from college. Sloan manages a lab in Raleigh, more meticulous and clear-headed than anyone I know. When she heard my shaking voice, she listened in silence. "I have a notarized document. It says the house transfers to Tyler if I die. And there's a signature with my name. But it isn't mine." I heard a sharp inhale on the other end. "Send me a scan right now. Let me take a look." I did as she said, my hands unsteady. A few minutes later, Sloan called back, her voice grave. "Caitlin, this signature doesn't match anything I've ever seen from you. The lines are shaky, broken, like someone tried to imitate you but wasn't confident. This is clearly forged." I sank onto the bed, tears threatening. If they dared to do this, it means they want to make me the sacrifice. If anything happens, it will all land on me. Sloane kept her tone calm, though I could hear the worry in every word. You have to be extremely careful. This is no longer a family matter. This is criminal. Paperwork, forged signatures, using a social security number without consent. Any of it could make you the victim if you don't bring it to light. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth to steady myself. In my mind, images piled up. Ruth smirking as she slid the papers toward me, Tyler bowing his head and pretending to be busy eating, Martin saying nothing, as if all of it had been planned. I remembered the name Moore Family Foundation on the transaction list. A name that sounded tied to me but was actually a trap. They wanted me to bear the liability, so if there were audits, if there were lawsuits, I would be the first name called. And they would stand aside, playing the victims, or worse, the lawful replacements. In the darkness, I shook in waves. The truth was stark. They had long planned to remove me. Not with cruel words and a smear job at the country club, but with carefully notarized legal documents. I heard Sloane's voice like a lifeline. Listen, Caitlin. Don't let your emotions carry you away. You need to keep all these documents, back them up, and find a good attorney. And do not confront them directly right now. You may think you're in a troubled marriage, but in reality you're standing in the middle of a chess match. If you slip, they'll win. I hung up. The motel room felt suffocating. I forced myself to breathe slowly so I wouldn't spiral into panic. Inside me, the pain had turned into something else. A cold awakening. If I didn't act, if I didn't prepare, one day my name might show up on a death record, and everything would flow into their hands as if nothing wrong had ever happened. I clenched the paper in my hand. Each crease pressed into my skin like an engraved reminder. I had no choice but to face the truth. This was no longer a story of a failing marriage, but a dangerous game where both my life and my name were on the line. The next morning, I walked out with nothing but a small bag and a new resolve. I went to see Jordan Alvarez, a family and estate attorney Sloane had recommended. His office sat in an old red brick building in downtown Raleigh, with a polished brass plaque outside. Jordan was around 40, solidly built, with sharp but warm eyes. He listened as I laid everything out, not looking surprised, only taking notes in silence and occasionally asking brief questions. Caitlin, he said when I finished, the most important thing is to protect yourself first. I'll help you freeze your credit so they can't open any more accounts in your name. From now on, all your paychecks and income must be kept separate. No more tying them to joint accounts. We'll also set up a living trust for any assets in your name in case they try anything. Jordan arranged for me to meet two more people. Ben Ricks, a private investigator who used to be a police officer, and Priya Shah, a forensic financial expert. Ben arrived with a calm demeanor, an old leather jacket, and a low, gravelly voice. He shook my hand, firm and steady. I don't care what they staged. My job is to find the truth. We'll place a lawful recording device in the shared car, because it's community property. If there's anything we need to hear, it will say it all. Priya was different. Slightly younger than me, sharp and quick. He brought a laptop and a folder. After only a few days of review, she found something I had never imagined. When Priya set the thick printed file on the table, I almost stopped breathing. On the cover were the words, Moore Family Foundation, 501c3. At a glance, anyone would think this was a legitimate charity, registered as a nonprofit. Everything looked tidy. IRS approval, an organization ID number, even a bare-bones website with community support images. But when Priya pointed to each transaction line, the truth was plain. This foundation had no real charitable activity. There were no transparent financial reports, no photos of charity events, no volunteer names. Instead, the operating expenses were withdrawn regularly every month and transferred straight to a shell company under Grant's name. The name Moore in the foundation sent a chill through me. They deliberately chose my last name to create the impression that this was a fund my family had set up. If one day any agency investigated, the first suspect would be me, the woman with the last name Moore, legally tied by marriage on paper. They had built a perfect financial trap. Charity on the outside, a hidden money channel inside, with me as the legal shield, if it all blew up. Priya spoke slowly, her voice cutting cold. Caitlin, this is the kind of 501c3 abuse that federal law punishes severely. They set up a fake foundation and used a nonprofit's name to move money elsewhere. If discovered, the foundation will be frozen and whoever is responsible can go to prison. And with the way they attach the name more, every trail will lead straight to you. Do you understand? It means they didn't forge my name, I whispered. They laundered money by tying it to my last name so that when there's an investigation, every spear points at me. Exactly. This isn't a family matter anymore, Caitlin. This is a financial conspiracy. I sat in silence, my heart in knots. But within the fear, I felt a new strength taking shape. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Jordan, Ben, and Priya, a small but razor-sharp team. That evening, Ben and I installed the device in the shared SUV that Tyler usually drove. Everything happened quickly and cleanly. Ben told me to go about my life as usual. The more natural, the better. People are most careless when they think they're on home turf, he said, eyes glinting. Cars are where many people let their guard down the most. We'll hear what they really say when no one else is around. I never thought I'd be doing something like this, but now every step was necessary. A few days later, I returned to the old house in the suburbs, the place we rented before Tyler finished his MBA. I remembered there were a few boxes of Ruth's old family items left in the garage. I opened them one by one. Dust flew everywhere. Clothes, old books, faded frames. Then at the very bottom corner I found an old quilt, yellowed with age. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to Eloise Whitaker, Ruth's mother by blood. Ruth had boasted that it was a precious keepsake, always carefully preserved. I lifted the quilt and felt an unusual weight. The seams were thick and uneven. A hunch told me this was more than a quilt. I ran my hands along the rough stitches, my heartbeat pounding. In that moment, the scene from the country club flooded back. Ruth's casual smile, Grant, a sneer, Tyler's bowed silence. And now, this quilt, with its strange seams, felt like a message from the past, from the very woman who made Ruth who she is. I sank to the garage floor with the quilt across my lap. The dim bulb cast light over each stitch. I drew a deep breath and slid my hand to the thickest seam. A chill raced down my spine, but this time it wasn't simple fear. It was the sense of a new door, a door to the truth they had hidden for so long. I hugged the quilt to my chest, eyes stinging. I wasn't fighting a family's contempt. I was facing a whole web of secrets and schemes that could crush anyone who didn't expose them in time. And I made a quiet promise to myself. Stitch by stitch, piece by piece, I would trace this to the very end. That morning, envelopes from the IRS and the bank were shoved under the motel door. The header read, "Request for explanation, Moore Family Foundation." And right below it the line, "Treasurer, Caitlin Moore." I had never signed any document to hold that title. Yet here it was on official papers, my name stamped like a mark of guilt. At noon the phone rang. I recognized Ruth's voice instantly. She spoke sweet as honey, the tone I had mistaken for caring all those years. "Caitlin, you got the letter, didn't you? Don't worry, a paperwork error. I need you to help explain things to the IRS. Say a few simple things, sign a few spots, and this will all blow over quickly." I clenched the phone, listening to the slick ease in every word. She didn't sound panicked like someone accidentally caught up in trouble. On the contrary, she was calm, as if she already had a script. I swallowed my trembling and pretended to agree. "Yes, I'll come over to talk." Before I went, I met Ben. He handed me a tiny device. "Don't worry, it's entirely legal. You'll need to switch it on when you go inside the house. Whatever they say, we'll have it on record." That afternoon, I stepped into the house where I had scrubbed every corner and prepared countless family dinners. Now, every wall and object felt like a witness to betrayal. Ruth sat waiting at the dining table, and Caleb, the cousin who was both pastor and notary, was there too. They didn't even hide their connection. She slid a stack of papers toward me, speaking lightly. "Here, just a few pages to fix. You re-sign them to confirm the foundation is still operating for its intended purpose. The IRS won't dig any deeper." Quietly, I switched on the recorder in my purse and frowned on purpose. "But why is my name listed as treasurer? I never signed that." Caleb spoke up, soft but sure. "There were a few errors in the notary records. We can correct them, but under no circumstances can the notary log be exposed. If anyone audits it, there's no way to deny it." I nodded as if convinced, my insides roiling. Every word he said was clear proof of the trap they had set for me. That evening, after leaving Ruth's house, I sat in the car, palms sweating. I played back the recording from the device Ben had installed in the SUV. Tyler's voice came through, clear and unmistakable. Mom already said it. Push the accounting errors onto Caitlin and we're done. The IRS won't dig further. The husband I once trusted was casually discussing how to make me the shield. I returned to the room with a heart like stone. On the bed, Eloise's quilt still lay there. I ran my fingers over the seams, feeling the irregular thickness along the edge. On instinct, I took a small pair of scissors and began undoing the old stitches. The worn fabric gave way and then a wax-sealed envelope slipped out, landing in my lap. My hands shook as I picked it up. The seal was intact, the red wax faded but firm. On the front, the handwriting was crooked but familiar. Eloise W. Eloise, Ruth's mother, had hidden something in this quilt, like a secret carried through the years. I pressed the envelope to my chest, feeling as if her trembling hand were resting on mine, passing me a truth their family had tried to bury. I tremblingly opened the wax-sealed envelope that had fallen from the quilt's hem. Inside was a handwritten letter, the script shaky but clear, and a tiny memory card taped down with pale yellow paper tape. I opened my laptop and inserted the card. A video appeared on the screen. Eloise's image, gaunt face but bright eyes, sat in an old armchair. Her voice was hoarse but precise. If you are watching this, it means I've gone. I leave this as an addendum to my will with the original held by my private attorney. The shares of the Whitaker Square Shopping Center will no longer belong to Ruth or her sons. They will go to the one who has kept honesty in this family. I write clearly in the accompanying handwritten letter. Caitlin Moore. She paid all the post-operative care expenses for Martin with her own hard-earned wages, while the rest of you were busy jockeying and dodging responsibility. I trust her because she lives by integrity, not by scheming. In her final moments, Eloise had seen through everything and chose me. I opened the envelope with the handwritten letter. Its clumsy lines confirmed exactly what she said in the video, with her private attorney named as witness. This was not evidence. It was a counterstrike strong enough to flip the entire board. A few days later at Avery's bridal shower, Tyler's cousin, I arrived with a small gift wrapped in plain brown paper. When Ruth saw me, her eyes flickered for a moment before a fake smile spread across her face. "Oh, Caitlin, you came. I hope you're not upset anymore." "I came to apologize. There's a gift I want to give." I placed the package on the living room table, right next to Ruth's smart TV. Inside the package was a stack of printed documents and a small NFC tag. When Avery curiously tapped her phone to it, the TV screen lit up immediately. The documents appeared. A flowchart of money moving from the Moore Family Foundation through Avery's shell company, then paying hotel bills under Ruth's and Tyler's names. The earlier chatter fell silent. Ruth's face drained of color. Tyler stepped back and Avery turned pale, her trembling hand dropping the champagne glass, shards shattering across the floor. Priya had prepared one more piece for me. Photos of Caleb's original notary log, compared with the log he had previously provided. The two did not match at all. The TV displayed a red caption. "Forgery detected." Caleb broke into a sweat, stammering wordlessly. I pressed the next button. Eloise's video appeared on the big screen. Her weak but resolute voice filled the room. "The person I trust, the one who keeps honesty in this family, is Caitlin Moore." Ruth's legs gave way and she had to hold on to the chair. Tyler turned his face aside, unable to meet my eyes. Avery gasped and then shouted, "Joe?" She wasn't in her right mind. She didn't know what she was saying. I stepped forward and placed a small USB on the table. My voice was calm but carried. "This is the full chain of custody. All the evidence, from recordings, videos, and financial documents to the notary comparisons. If there is no public apology tonight, the foundation is repaid and the divorce papers are signed. Tomorrow morning I will send the entire file to the Attorney General and the IRS." Ruth stammered, her hands shaking. "You can't. This is a misunderstanding." She. Eloise made it clear. "It's not a misunderstanding. This is the truth." Right then Ruth's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and her face went paper white. The caller's name was clear. Eloise's estate attorney. I saw her hands shake so hard she nearly dropped the phone. I stood tall and drew a long breath. The curtain that had covered everything for years had begun to rip. The next morning I received a text from Tyler. "I need to see you. Just once. At the old diner." I sat in the car for a long time before going in. The smell of weak coffee and the clink of dishes sounded familiar, but my heart felt entirely distant. Tyler was already at the window table, shirt rumpled, face gaunt. He looked up when he saw me, his eyes hurried and anxious. "Thank you for coming." I sat down, kept my distance, and folded my hands on the table to steady the tremor. The server poured coffee and Tyler stayed silent until we had a bit of privacy. He took a deep breath. "I know, things have gotten out of hand. If Mom goes down, I'll be dragged down too. But if you stop now, I promise I'll change. I'll treat you better. We can start over." I looked straight into his eyes, a strange calm rising in me. "You chose to stand with lies," I said slowly. "And I, from now on, choose to stand with the truth." Tyler's face went pale and he muttered, "Do you really want to push this that far? Do you know how many people you'll drag in?" I let out a dry laugh. "Who are you worried about? Your mother, Avery, or yourself? As for me, I'm worried about myself. And I will not let myself become the scapegoat ever again." He lowered his head, his hands clenched together. But to my eyes, all that remained was a man who had chosen silence when I needed him most, and now trembled for fear of losing the protective shell of family. That afternoon I met with Jordan Alvarez at his office. The late light streamed through the large window, reflecting off the wooden plaque lined with professional certificates. Jordan listened as I recounted the meeting with Tyler, then nodded. "Just as I predicted. They'll try to negotiate. The point is, you hold all the cards now. This is the time to lock in the terms." We sat down with Ben and Priya and drew clear boundaries. I wanted justice, but I also wanted to close this without pulling innocent people into a legal spiral. Jordan laid it out directly in the settlement document. Immediate divorce. I keep the house and all separate assets already placed in the trust one established. No division, no dispute. Ruth and Avery must repay all funds withdrawn from the Moore Family Foundation, along with a written public apology submitted to the IRS and filed with their attorney. Caleb must resign his notary commission and submit the real notary log to the state to prove the forgery is ended. Final humane point. If all terms are completed on time and restitution is made in full, I will not push the matter criminally. I will prioritize protecting myself and keeping my own hands clean, without dragging bystanders into criminal court. Jordan set down his pen and looked up at me. "Caitlin, you know full well that if we take this all the way, they could face criminal charges, especially Ruth and Caleb. But that also means media coverage, and the children and their family will bear the weight of a shattered name. Are you sure you want this route? A settlement instead of revenge to the bitter end?" The image of Avery's 2 children, once chirping around during family gatherings, flashed in my mind. They are innocent. And I knew life was cruel enough already. I didn't want to become the one who sowed more ruin. "I'm sure," I answered. "I don't forgive them. But I don't need to push everything off a cliff either. I want a clean ending so I can move forward on my own." Jordan gave a faint smile and placed his steady hand over mine. "That's your strength. You don't let hatred define you. And that's why you'll walk out of here with your head held high." A week later, we held the formal meeting at Jordan's office. Ruth arrived, carefully made up but unable to hide the pallor. Avery avoided my eyes and Caleb clutched his files, sweat beading on his forehead. Tyler sat apart in the corner, head bowed in silence. Jordan opened the meeting, reading each term with crisp clarity. Every sentence pierced the heavy air like a needle. When he reached the clause about a public apology, Ruth sprang to her feet. "Impossible. My family will never." Jordan cut in, his voice like a blade. "Eloise left a video and a handwritten letter. I have the originals. If you want the IRS and the Attorney General involved, we can file within 10 minutes. The choice is yours." Ruth's face went pale, her lips trembling. She looked around, hoping for a nod of support. But Tyler avoided her eyes, Avery stayed silent, and Caleb kept his head down over the file. Finally, Ruth collapsed back into her chair and gasped through a choked sob. "Fine. I'll sign." Avery bit her lip, tears welling, but still placed her signature next to her mother's. Caleb slowly opened the file, pulling out the real logbook, his hand shaking so badly the paper nearly tore. I quietly watched each person sign, each letter appearing on the page. Not triumph, not gloating. Only a confirmation that I had protected myself, with truth and with patience. When they all left the room one by one, Jordan turned to me, his voice calm and steady. You've done what few can, held on to your dignity without letting hatred consume you. From here, new doors will open. I nodded softly, feeling a heavy weight in my chest finally begin to fall away. 6 months had passed since the day we signed those final papers in Jordan's office. My life felt split in two, one half closed with shadows, the other opening with gentle but steady light. The divorce was finalized. Tyler was placed under strict financial monitoring for 3 years, every transaction reported. Ruth was forced to step down from the Chamber of Commerce, where she once sat like a queen, and Avery was banned from running any fund under her own name or an organization's. Eloise's codicil had been recognized as legally valid by the court. The day I received the news, I sat still for a long while. The shares of Whitaker Square, the shopping center that had once been the Brooks family's golden lifeline, were transferred entirely into a community trust managed by an independent board. The profits no longer fell into private pockets but were redirected into scholarships and accessibility infrastructure for people with disabilities across the state. I remembered Eloise's words in that video. The one who keeps honesty deserves the key. And now that key belonged to no single person but to the community itself. I left the old house carrying only a few boxes of belongings and scattered memories, and moved to Denver, Colorado. The city, with snowy peaks in the distance and sunlit streets, gave me a new beginning. I rented a small apartment near downtown, close enough to walk to the building where I opened my office. A bright sign on the glass door read, North Star Rehab, my guiding star, a beacon for those searching to regain their strength. North Star Rehab wasn't glamorous like the big rehabilitation centers, but each room was warm, filled with light and the gentle scent of essential oils. I focused on patients who were often overlooked. Laborers, teachers, nurses, the ones who gave their lives to others but were forgotten when they themselves were injured. I still remember opening morning. A group of nurses from the nearby hospital dropped in, laughing and chatting, then sighed, "This place feels so welcoming. We're used to only being treated if we have strong insurance, otherwise we just push through." I smiled and answered, "Here you'll be seen and heard. We'll start with your own hands and your own breath." The first sessions carried an atmosphere of trust. A retired teacher wept openly when someone finally helped her work her stiff knees without rushing or dismissing her. A construction worker sighed with relief knowing he wouldn't face an impossible bill, because I designed a sliding scale payment system based on income. Alongside the clinic, I accepted Sloane's and Priya's invitation to co-host financial skills workshops for divorced women at the local library. Every Thursday evening, the second-floor classroom lit up. Women sat in a circle, pens in hand, eyes glinting with both hope and caution. Priya taught them how to read bank statements and spot unusual transactions in joint accounts. She explained each figure so clearly they became as familiar as puzzle pieces. Sloane shared about labor rights, protecting medical records, and contracts when controlled by a husband or in-laws. And I told my story not to complain but to remind them they weren't alone. I spoke of nights in that motel room, clutching Eloise's old quilt and crying until nothing was left. I spoke of the moment I stood against Ruth and Tyler, forcing them to face the truth. And I spoke of the peace that comes when you set hatred down and carry only quiet strength. One evening after class, a middle-aged woman named Marjorie came up to me, gripping my hand. "Caitlin, because of you I finally dared to speak about how my husband forced me to sign bank papers for 10 years. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but today, I feel I have worth." I hugged her tightly, realizing my journey had become a small light guiding someone else. Day by day, North Star Rehab grew busier. Some days I was so swamped I had to hire an administrative assistant, a young woman fresh out of public health school. I paid her fairly because I knew starting out with respect mattered most. One crisp October morning, sunlight fell across golden leaves as I stood by my office window, looking toward the Rockies. Peace rose in me like a tide. 6 months earlier, I had sat trembling in a motel room, IRS letters in hand, accused and cornered. Now I was building a new life, not perfect but entirely my own. And more importantly, I knew I was creating something meaningful, not for myself but for others who had known loss like mine. On a chilly weekend morning in Denver, the sun shone softly over quiet streets. I rolled up my sleeves and, with 2 volunteers from the community trust named after Eloise, installed a wooden ramp outside a ground-floor apartment for an elderly patient. He was a retired music teacher with a damaged knee after joint replacement surgery, unable to afford renovations. When he saw the gleaming new ramp, his eyes filled. "You didn't give me my legs back. You gave me my freedom." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "You deserve to live comfortably in your own home." Watching his frail hands tremble against the smooth wood, I thought of Eloise. The woman who saw beyond family ambition and left her resources to the community instead of letting them become fuel for greed. Now I was carrying her wish forward, turning truth into action. That afternoon back at the clinic, a package sat at my door. Inside was a patchwork quilt made of old fabrics, plaid shirts, floral dresses, even faded denim. On top was a handwritten note: "Thank you for stitching my life back together." It was from a middle-aged patient who had fallen into depression after her husband left, burying her in debt. After months of therapy at North Star Rehab, she found a new job and stability. I hugged the quilt to my chest, feeling the warmth sewn into every seam, as if life's pain could be mended with patience and care. I sat in my wooden office chair, the quilt spread across my desk, my heart softening. A simple gift, but holding more healing power than any polished words. The phone rang. An email from the Attorney General's office popped up. I opened it and read the short line: "The restitution file is complete. All parties have complied fully with the settlement terms." I set the phone down and closed my eyes. One final chaotic chapter had closed. All the empty promises, the falsified numbers, the forged contracts. Now a file marked resolved. I didn't cheer and I didn't feel the need to gloat. In that moment, the only thing left was peace. I walked to the window. Evening light spilled in, gilding the wooden floor. In that glow, I whispered to myself, "I don't need them to fall for me to be at peace. I've chosen the light for the next part of my life." That night, while tidying the clinic, I laid the quilt from my patient across the therapy room's long bench. The uneven stitches somehow lit up the room like a symbol. I placed my hand on it, closed my eyes, and heard echoes of children's laughter from memory, the soft laughter drifting in from the clinic hallway, and Eloise's gentle reminder: "The one who keeps honesty will keep the family." My family now wasn't bound by blood, but by those who came here to begin again. People who believed life could be mended piece by piece. And I, in some way, was healing alongside them. I often ask myself, what truly keeps us standing after turmoil? Is it justice returned, or the ability to choose peace even when revenge is within reach? For me, the answer lies here. When we stand with the truth, life itself begins stitching back the tears we thought unfixable. And what about you? If you were in my place, would you strike back to the end or let go to hold on to peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because every story, every perspective has the power to shine light for someone else. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can walk together through the next stories, where we'll keep listening, reflecting, and learning from the very struggles of family life. Because somewhere between pain and betrayal, we may find deeper messages of love, trust, and what it truly means to grow.